Well, if you've been watching our uploads this week, you might get the impression that we did not do any building projects. But of course that isn't the case. Nick will pause long enough to make some apple fritters, but he won't completely stop. What did happen is that the camera operator had limited confidence in our project this week, which was to pour a concrete slab in wintertime. It's no surprise though that Nick did manage to pull it off, and here he is to show you how.
Hello, I'm Nick. On the last day of January, we are pouring a concrete slab. So it takes a little bit of finagling to get the temperature right and get set up well. We have the mudroom blocked off to the outside air to try and control the temperature inside. We need to be well above 40 degrees to make the concrete work well, for it to be able to cure completely. So that's why we're mixing concrete in our living room. Come into our tent. When you're dumping out bags of concrete, there's a lot of dust that just flies up in the air. So we'll be wearing dust masks, and we've masked off the rest of the house so that we don't have concrete dust over absolutely everything. We're tented off, and this is the room we're pouring the floor into. So we're going to mix in here, we're going to dump through the door, move it around with shovels once it gets into that room. There's a couple of key things about the tent and making it work and making it not just a way to choke on concrete dust. A feature of our house is that we have a cold air intake on the north side of our house, and I've actually stretched that ductwork out to reach into the tent. So I have right here, this is a fresh supply of outdoor air coming right into the tent, and I'll leave that open just like so. And then you'll have to come this way. And then I have set up in one of the windows in the mudroom a fan that's actually blowing out. So that will push air out, providing fresh air from the outside. So it'll get a little bit chilly in here, but we're starting off at a good temperature, and I think it's better than operating just through the front door and mixing concrete outside in the cold. The other things that are crucial to the process, we have a water supply. This is hooked right into the pump that brings water from our spring. So we're using drinking water in this case. Before we've used pond water or other non-potable water for concrete, but in the middle of January, this is what we have, and we have a lot of it, so I'm not worried about our water supply. And then we also have a cord coming in from the generator to run this rented mixer. I have our moisture barrier down. This is just a 6 mil visqueen. That is just so that the concrete and the house don't weep moisture up from the ground. So it's just there to stop that moisture from coming right into the house because concrete will wick moisture. Under that is essentially road mix. We had sand and we had gravel left over from separate projects. And we mixed the two. It's about a road mix consistency, and we spread that out and tamped that all down. Then we covered it with the visqueen, and then I have the 6-inch mesh as our reinforcement in that concrete. I just have it laying on the floor right now. As we're pouring, we'll just give it a little bit of a lift so it ends up somewhat in the middle of our 4-inch slab. This feature is It's going to be a 4-inch deep pit, 2 foot by 3 foot, and it's going to be essentially our welcome mat in here. We'll do a metal bar grate over the top of that pit that will end up flush with the concrete slab, and that's a place where you can wipe your feet. Dirt will mostly fall down into the pit and off of your shoes, and then you can come over here and get changed into whatever your house shoes might be. But we poured this slab first, so that's 4 inches thick as well, down in a hole. Poured it a little wider and deeper than it needed to be, so that the form was able to sit right on there, and the new slab will overlap the lower slab.
And this is a timber frame house. So how does the concrete interact with the timber frame?
So let's see. So I have the timber frame posts covered up because we're going to be looking at those in the finished product, much like our house. So I have them masked so that we don't slop too much concrete on here. But down at the bottom of the post is this steel standoff, and the height on this was determined by the thickness of that slab. So it's sitting on a concrete pier that's about that big, welded to a steel plate that's embedded in that pier. And when we pour the floor, concrete's going to come up to about an inch away from the wood post here. And what that does is that separates the wood from the concrete. Even though we are protecting our concrete from taking outside moisture in, we still don't want wood to masonry contact. So that's our solution for how to do that, is a steel standoff. The timber frame will never touch masonry.
Can you tell me more about the mixer? Can you tell me about your mixer history and mixer opinions?
Yeah, so we bought a used mixer and we used it. We put almost 8 yards of concrete through it ourselves, and it was an older machine. So some of the bearings gave out. We really we abused that machine, I guess, or maybe it was on its last legs when we got it. So I have opted this time to pay a 1-day rental on a 6 cubic foot cement mixer. We have about 32 bags to work our way through here, so that'll go a lot faster than the little 2-bagger machine. So the plan is I will be the mix master. I'll oversee the consistency of the concrete, and Esther will be manual labor. She'll work a shovel. She'll run the water hose now and then, and we'll work together to place all of the concrete. We rented the 6 cubic foot mixer. It can take 4 80-pound bags of concrete at a time. So we start out with 4 gallons of water and 2 bags of concrete. We mix that until it's good and sloppy, and then we add the 3rd bag of concrete. And I may add a little water at that point, depending on the consistency. And then we add the 4th bag in halves, adjusting the consistency with water in between the 2 halves. You gotta be a little patient and let the thing mix a bit before you decide to add more water. It's really easy to end up with a really runny mix, and then there's kind of no going back from that. Once it's all mixed and looking good, we wheel it right up to the door and dump it out right at the doorstep, and then we shovel from there into the corners of the room. We probably would have brought the mixer into the room if we had not had our little pit grate set up in the middle of the room. So we're pouring around this formwork, so that added a level of difficulty to it. So it took us 2 or 3 loads before we had anything that was worth screeding. Screeding is just scraping it off level. And what I had done is set up a couple of boards on the long walls of the room, and that is just a reference point. And I then made a board that was wide enough to scrape along those boards and go down to the level where I wanted the floor to end up. That's just what I came up with in order to have a reference point that wasn't then buried in concrete. It worked relatively well. It's a little bit hard to screed with a tall board like that because it tends to want to roll over a lot, but it's a good reference. So working it over a couple of times, it really works to get the concrete generally down to the level that it needs to be. It's then a little bit of work with a pool trowel to smooth it out, and that's as smooth as I'm taking it. I didn't rent a bull float or anything else to get this floor any flatter. It's a mudroom. It doesn't need to be absolutely beautiful, and I didn't want to get into all of the details to really finish this thing out super smooth. So I thought I'd just get sort of the least expensive trowel out there and see what I could do. And it's an experiment, and I think it has gone relatively well, and I'm happy with the result. All right, so that's how we pulled off pouring concrete in January. We'll show you how it fits into the project in the next Mountain Dream home.
Okay, so the concrete is hard and rough. Must have done it right. Good job. Ow.